fellow collectors, and welcome to Long's Toys. Today we are taking a look at the Megatron HISS tank with Baroness from the Transformers G.I. Joe crossover line from Hasbro. So this is kind of a neat idea. We have Transformers characters transforming into G.I. Joe and Cobra vehicles, and it seems like a crossover that they probably should have thought of years ago. I'm surprised it took them this long to get here. I've heard some things. I'm trying to go into this with an open mind, but I've seen a lot of hate for this thing online, so I'm really trying to go in with an open mind and see how it goes, because I really like the idea. I want it to work. I think it's really neat. So we have Megatron here. There's already a Bumblebee that's been released. A Soundwave is rumored to be in the works, and I think there's a fourth one based off Sergeant Slaughter's vehicle that has also been rumored. So it seems like they have designs for this line. It doesn't sound like it's slowing down anytime soon. So I want this to work. I'm really trying to go in with an open mind. We'll see how it goes. But right off the bat, the packaging here is beautiful. So you kind of have your Transformer side, your G.I. Joe side. Transformer side is very much based off the original G1 packaging with that kind of grid in the background. Beautiful Decepticon version of the Transformers logo here, which looks really, really great. And then over here you have the HISS tank with Baroness in front with a big explosion in the background, which is very reminiscent of the original G.I. Joe packaging. So right off the bat, I love the packaging. I think that's really, really cool. Up top here, we have the robot mode for Megatron, the HISS tank mode. Baroness is hanging out there. Got the G.I. Joe logo over here. Not too much going on down here. Got that G.I. Joe Autobot, Transformers collaborative logo going on there. And then on the sides, again, we have robot mode and vehicle mode. And then over here, I guess it's just trying to mimic, like, this is what the side of, like, a G.I. Joe vehicle packaging would kind of look like back in the day. So that's kind of what they're going for there. And then over here, again, mimicking the original G1 packaging for Transformers. And then over here on the back, just showing, again, product shots. The robot mode, the vehicle mode. We got Baroness here. She's in the turret. She's in the cockpit, riding and manning the turrets there. So she can actually fit inside, which I think is really cool. This was made to be in scale with these O-ring figures, which are very reminiscent of the original Joes from back in the day. So I really like the packaging. And then the part where it kind of disappoints me, and it's not a big deal, but when you slide these slip covers off, it's just a boring brown box. So once you take these things off, and we'll put these off to the side for the moment as I knock the camera, it's just a brown box. It just has a big Hasbro logo there. It says G.I. Joe, Transformers, Megatron, HISS tank. And then when we open this up, he's just kind of, you know, tied to a piece of cardboard there. And I don't really know what I expected, but I just think it's funny that the front of the box is so exciting. And then as soon as you take those off, it's just this bland, boring cardboard box. But it is what it is. I'm going to go ahead, get everything out of here, and we'll take a closer look. So here is the Baroness that comes included. I wanted to show off her packaging because she does come on her own card. It just kind of looks like a separate release that's kind of been tucked inside the box. But if you spin around to the back, you can see we got HISS tank, Megatron, and the collaborative logo down here in the corner. So that's how you can tell that it wasn't just a single release. Now, they just started doing this O-ring retro line, and as far as I know, Baroness is exclusive to this set. I don't know if they're going to release one later on with maybe a slightly different costume or something like that, or maybe just the back won't have this picture, and that's how you'll be able to tell the difference. I don't know. If I was a G.I. Joe collector and I didn't care at all about Transformers, I'd probably be pretty upset that this was locked into this set. Like I said, hopefully for those collectors and fans, I hope they get their own release later on, or they can just find someone who bought this set and doesn't care about the Baroness figure, that maybe they can, you know, help each other out. But yeah, so this is just bundled in here. Now, I gotta be honest, I do like G.I. Joe. I'm a decent G.I. Joe fan. I'm not a huge fan of the O-rings, and if you're not familiar, I keep saying O-ring. If you don't know what that means, it refers to the circular rubber band that connects the top and the bottom half of the figure and gives it the waist articulation. It's kind of just like a circular rubber band. They call it an O-ring. I'm just not a big fan of those. To me, it's kind of like the retro collection for Star Wars and the vintage collection for Star Wars. I like this scale of figure, but I would rather have the vintage collection. It's the same scale, much better articulation. The retro line is for people that really just love the nostalgia of it all. And I get it. I understand why there's a market for it. But I kind of wish that this was like more of a vintage collection style figure. And they did that 25th anniversary back at the 25th anniversary, which I guess probably would have been 5-7 years ago at this point. And that was a great line. I got a lot of that. So I'm not super interested in, rebuying these figures as the classic O-rings, but I had very little of the classic O-ring figures, so I can just kind of, have Baroness with that collection, I guess. But it's beautiful packaging. Like I said, very retro inspired. You got the explosion in the background, G.I. Joe up top, Cobra Enemy. She's got some accessories here that we'll take a look at. And I mean, I got to have her ride around in Megatron, right? So I got to open her. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So here are Megatron and the Baroness out of the packaging here, and you can see scale-wise, Megatron's pretty big. Like, I don't think he's quite Menasor big, but he's fairly close. Just to give you an idea of scale, here is Voyager class, Leo Prime, Lio Convoy, whatever you'd like to call him. So you can see he's probably about twice as tall as a modern Voyager. So he's pretty big. I will give him that. He is pretty big. Here is the Baroness. We'll take a quick look at her. And then we can move on to Megatron. She comes with this little base. I have to be honest, I kind of wish this peg was a little bit more to the side, just because I feel like that way I could have the whole figure standing on the base instead of having the one leg kind of hang out to the side, so that's a little weird. But overall, I think she does look pretty good. Head sculpt definitely looks good, but has that retro feel. She's definitely got some giant glasses there. Head can kind of very minimally turn side to side. Got the nice Cobra logo there. You have a hinge and a rotation in the shoulder there. You do have a bicep swivel. You have 90 degrees there in the elbow. And then the forearm and hand are all one solid piece, but you can see she's got some nice molded in detail on both forearms there. And this is what I mean by the O-ring. It's actually a little, if you pull that out, there's a rubber band inside, and that's how this piece can kind of get that whole range of motion there like that. And then you have kind of this metal T-bar in here for the waist. So that way you can kind of kick out to the side, kick forward. Can't really go back at all. All of the molding there for all of the copyright information. But she does have a kind of a cool gun here molded on the one side of the thigh. And then she's got a 90-degree bend at the knee. And then she's got peg holes here on the bottom of the feet. And then she comes with this gun and this backpack, which has a little Cobra on it. And this just pegs right in very simply. So we just pop this off. And it actually pegs on really securely. So it's a cool looking figure. I think she looks pretty good. Definitely has that retro feel to it, which is nice. I'm going to go ahead and just peg her back on here. And then we will put her off to the side. And we will revisit her when we get Megatron into vehicle mode. But for now, we got to talk about Megatron himself. So, for the most part, I think he looks pretty good aesthetically from the front. He's got this giant piece that jets out in the back, and this part does come separately in the box. You have to kind of attach it to the back. It's got kind of like a rod with kind of two little nubs on the end, and you kind of have to like get it on one and then click it on the other one. And it's pretty secure on there once you do that. But this has the whole like turret section here. It's got the window of the cockpit that just hangs down there. You have the whole back section of the HISS tank here that just kind of pegs into his wrist as a shield. So that's a pretty substantial section of the HISS tank that's just supposed to be worn as a shield. I'm going to put that off to the side. You can see that he's got the fusion cannon over here. That just pegs into the wrist. That is all completely hollow. I have to admit, this feels kind of cheap. It's obviously molded in the gray plastic and then painted black. The paint looks good. I don't have a problem with that. But it's just so thin that I really just feel like that didn't need to be that way. And it just kind of gives it an overall cheap feel. I'm going to be honest. This guy has kind of an overall cheap feel to him, which is kind of a bummer. Like I said, aesthetically, I think he looks okay. I think, he looks like Megatron. He looks like a HISS tank. He's got a bunch of kibble, I have to admit. But some of it works. Some of it's okay. But he definitely has a really hollow feel to him. If we spin him around the back, you can see that the entire forearms here are completely hollow. There's no wrist movement here. They're all hollow. I really feel like that wasn't needed. The legs here are all hollow. Even inside the treads here, and it's probably hard to actually see this, but that's all hollow in there. And I just feel like it didn't need to be that way. These pieces here are going to become treads. They're all hollow there. You can see the inside of the thighs are hollow. Like, he just feels really hollow. And maybe it was just kind of like a weight thing because he's so big. If they filled that all in, he'd just be too chonky, maybe be too heavy. I don't know. He doesn't feel like he's going to break at all. I won't say that, but he just, when you pick him up, he feels, again, cheap seems too mean, but he does feel hollow. He feels less substantial, and I am just surprised by that. I was really kind of surprised by that. Nice paint applications. You have all these logos for Cobra. They look pretty good. The paint here for these missile pods looks pretty good. I think everything going on in the chest here for Megatron looks good. Got the Decepticon symbol there. Head sculpt, I think, works. I think that looks pretty good. The eyes are painted red very nicely. Head has a bit of a up and down for the ball joint there. A little bit of tilt side to side. Can look side to side, no problem. For the shoulders, you have a rotation here. I feel like it's a little loose. It's not terrible. But you can also move the shoulder pads way out of the way if you want. And then you have a hinge out to the side. You have a bicep swivel right above the elbow. You have 90 degrees there in the elbow. I don't think we have anything in the waist because of how he transforms. But he's got pretty decent hip joints here. You can kick pretty far back too, even if you just get these pods out of the way a little bit. You can do pretty decent range. And then you can, these are on little ball joints here, these little pod pieces. So you can get them out of the way if you want him to kick out to the side. You have a thigh swivel there, as you can see. And then he's got nice knee joints that I would say go over 90 due to transformation. He doesn't have any ankle tilt, though, which I feel like is a bummer for a figure this big. You would expect him to have ankle tilt. But it is what it is, I guess. He does have some nice heels back here, so he doesn't really have any trouble standing up, which is nice, because he is pretty back heavy, as you would imagine. And then we have that really nice Cobra symbol there right above the head on the turret. So he's got decent articulation. Yes, he does have a decent amount of kibble, but I feel like at least it's just on the back, and it doesn't really get in the way of articulation at all, which is nice. And even these little, like, skirt pod things that he's got going on here, they're on ball joints, so you can kind of move them around however you want, and they don't really get in the way, which is nice. So he's got a decent robot mode. I'm just surprised at how hollow he is, because this was not a cheap figure. I think it was 80 or 90. I can't remember exactly. I feel like a decent part of that is probably the Baroness figure, because that O-ring retro line is fairly pricey. I feel like they usually charge like $20 a piece for those. So if you kind of take that off the top, now he's more in the, like, you know, 60 to 70 range, which I feel like is a little bit more reasonable, because he is very, very tall. So I'll give him that. I'm just surprised at how hollow he is, because I really didn't think he needs to be. But it is what it is. I also want to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because this is like the first one they've done. So maybe Bumblebee will be a little bit better. Maybe Soundwave will be even a little bit better after that, and so on and so forth. Maybe they're just kind of finding their way with these, balancing price point and quality and everything like that. So we'll see. But honestly, like, I have to say, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's kind of cool. I like the gimmick. I like the G.I. Joe Transformer crossover. It's really just the hollowness and the way some of the plastic, because it's hollow, feels a little bit cheaper. But it doesn't feel like it's going to break. It just feels hollow and cheap in that regard. It's hard to put into words. It really is. When you handle the thing, you will probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But I kind of am thinking that it's them kind of juggling size and, you know, the fullness of the plastic. But it is what it is. Let's go ahead. Let's get into the transformation. All right, so I'll do my best to keep this thing in frame the whole time. He's a very big boy, so we will see what we can do. So we are going to start by flipping this whole section up, not just this part here, but actually this entire piece here, right there, like that. And then you'll kind of unhook this. It's kind of hooked into the back. It actually hooks into the two shoulder pieces, so you want to unhook it from there. You're going to take these pieces, bring these around like this, but you actually want to push them a little bit further so that you have clearance to swivel these pieces down. and then close it back up. And what that's going to do is kind of fill in this gap, and you're starting to build the cockpit here. So you're going to bring this around, go a little bit past, swing this down, that fills in the bottom of the canopy, and then put that back. So I guess if you really wanted to, you could leave them with these gigantic shoulder pads if you wanted to. Looks a little silly though. At this point, we are going to lift up the shoulder pieces because that will kind of unhook this torso section here, and you want to make sure that this is out of the way when you do that. And that will allow you to lift up this entire section, which is going to kind of float up in space about there. At this point, you can also start to bring these out. You're going to come down here to the feet and flip the heels in, like so. You're going to take the legs and start to fold them in on themselves, like so. And there are these two tiny notches here in the crotch. You can see one right there and right there. And these little notches right here are going to fit into them once you close this up, like this. And then this will drop down into that notch like that. So the two legs don't peg into each other. They just peg into those notches there. Now your natural inclination might be to flip up the feet at this point, but do not do that. At this point, we are going to have the abdomen go like that so that you can bring these down, and these will actually peg into the back of the tank treads like this. So that will click into place there, and then bring this around and click that into place there. So now you can see we kind of have our treads in place. The tank is starting to take shape. I'm going to fold the feet up just a bit so that the tank treads will sit. I find it much easier to transform him if I can get the tank treads where they're supposed to go, and then just let him sit on the tank treads and finish off the rest of this. So we're going to swivel this around like so. This is going to pop out like this and then come around, and we want to lift up the arms so that we can make clearance and bring this all the way in like that. So we're going to take this away from the body, bring this around. You want the hands to swivel at the bicep, and then these are going to fit into these empty spaces down here. So this is going to go in like this, and then you kind of push it so that it fills in that little area like that. So bring this in. This will rotate. This will come in like this, and I believe these two click together. I should probably do that before I put the hand in. All right, let me bring this back out. Those two peg together like that. Then we can bring the hands in, fill in these spaces, and then push these down like that. There we go. And then at that point, you can go ahead and flip the feet in to fill in those spaces. So then you're going to peg these two sections together, and then this is just going to drop down like that. You're going to come around to this section. The Megatron torso here will kind of come down, and you can see how he's got these two tabs on the side. They will tab into these little spots on the inside of the tread right there. So you can just kind of bring this in and then line this up, and this will tab in there and there, and that kind of secures that up. So you can kind of see that you just have Megatron's whole head and torso just hanging out there. At this point, you're going to take this, and this is going to drop down over this whole section here. And it can be a little tricky. Sometimes you kind of have to bring these like side pieces of plastic, like pull them out a little bit, just to make sure that they'll get over everything. And then this, you can see that there's these little clips right here and here. And so this will kind of come down. This will peg in here, and then that will clip together there. So you kind of just bring this all down, click that into place, click these all together. Make sure that clicks in. All right, come on. There we go. So that will all click in pretty solidly. You can bring the canopy down. spin the turret around like so, and then you just have a HISS tank with Megatron's head hanging out there. Now, you have to bring that piece back in. That was a shield earlier, and you can see that there's these two pieces right here, and that just clicks right over top. Just hiding his head just like so, and then he's got this hitch piece in his torso that you can bring out as a hitch piece, and that kind of hides the torso a little bit. You still have the Decepticon symbol and basically his whole torso hanging out there, but I feel like it could almost be thought of as like an engine block or something, because it's kind of square and gray and dull enough that it's not super distinctive. So I think that's what they're hoping you'll think. But here we go. This is a pretty solid HISS tank. Honestly, I feel like it's a solid... Like, you could look at this and not know right away that this is a Transformer. You could just go, oh, this is a scaled HISS tank for 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe figures. Like, when you look at the front, obviously you can see the feet down there. When you look at the back, you can see the Decepticon symbol. But if you just look at it from the side, it kind of just looks like a HISS tank. I mean, it's got really nice decals here. We got the paint applications for the Cobra symbol. We have these down here. We have all these on the side, the 788. Got, again, that Cobra decal there on the front of the turret. And I will say that these guns are completely hollow underneath as well, and they kind of feel a little cheesy, but they do the job. I mean, they just peg in there and then they stay there kind of forever. They can completely move up and down like so. The whole turret spins. Honestly, it's a really solid looking HISS tank. So of course we have to bring Baroness in and put her in the various places that she can ride along. If we open up the canopy here, and it does have kind of a little hold molded into it, so you can go ahead and grab it by that, which is nice. But if we bring her in, bend her at the waist, and sit her inside, there we go. She sits inside very easily, and you can close this. Just lift her head up a little bit so that back part of the canopy clearances. There we go. You can see she rides inside very easily. A lot of nice space in there. She looks great. You can see her through the window. Looks fantastic. If we open this up, take her out of here, we can, of course, put her in the turret here in the back so she can ride along in here. No problems whatsoever. And then there are also these pegs on the back. So if you wanted to peg her on the back as well. Now, for whatever reason, she doesn't seem to peg into these as well. There you go. She pegs into that one a little bit better. But it's kind of cool. So if you have any of the other O-ring figures they've put out, you could theoretically have 4 figures ride on this at once. And that's kind of cool. I think it really does work well as a Cobra HISS tank. And honestly, I think the Megatron robot mode is fine. It just feels very hollow. But in this mode, it feels very solid. I mean, you can see it's pretty compact. It feels solid. It holds together very well. I think they did a really nice... I feel, honestly, what it feels like is this was the priority, and then make the robot work from there. But it felt like if they had to sacrifice one of the modes, they were going to sacrifice the robot mode, because they wanted the HISS tank to work. And it does. It really does. You can also take the fusion cannon and peg it in up here. I haven't shown that off yet, but if you want a little bit extra firepower on there, you can put his fusion cannon up top. So I like this. I really like him in HISS tank mode. I think it works great. Honestly, I can't decide how I feel about this set. I want to love it. I really do. I mean, it's Transformers, it's G.I. Joe. It's such an obvious crossover that, like I said, I'm surprised it took them so long to get here. It should work on every level. And for the most part, I guess it does. I'll break down what I kind of like and hate about this. So, aesthetically, I think the robot mode looks pretty cool. I think, yes, it's Megatron. You know, he's got the head and chest of Megatron. The rest of him, kind of the legs are Megatron as well. And then he's got all of the HISS tank pieces kind of hanging off of him. It doesn't really feel like there was a fully integrated robot design. It feels like Megatron with a bunch of HISS tank parts hanging off of him, which kind of works, kind of doesn't work. I still haven't really decided. I kind of go back and forth on it. But I think ultimately I do like it. The thing that I don't like about it is how hollow it feels in spots. I mean, these pieces are hollow, all the tread pieces are hollow, the legs, the thighs, the forearms. There's just a lot of hollowness going on in this guy that's really kind of a shame. And I'm thinking to myself that maybe that was their way of kind of balancing the height by not making him so chonky and heavy. So maybe that's why they did it. Maybe they just had to cut price point. I don't know. So that's kind of my major complaint about it, is just the hollow feeling. The inclusion of the Baroness figure is nice. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the retro O-ring figures, but it does have a charm to it. You know, the nostalgia's there, and it's a pretty good figure for what it is. I just feel like if they could have sold this without a figure, I definitely think it would be cheaper. But then again, because the figure is kind of so integral to how this thing was engineered, it totally makes sense to include a figure with it, because it definitely feels like this was made to, like, the HISS tank was the priority. We need a HISS tank that can hold 3 3/4 inch Joe figures, and if you can make it transform into a robot, that would be great. And that's kind of what it feels like, honestly, because the HISS tank mode is super solid, in my opinion. It looks great. It holds together well. It feels very solid. And if you just look at it from the side, you wouldn't necessarily know it's not just a HISS tank from the G.I. Joe line. That's how good I think it works. So it really does feel like that was the priority. But they did that part well. So if that was the priority, at least they did nail that. As far as the robot mode goes, it's growing on me. I definitely just don't love the hollowness. The other thing is the price point. I cannot remember for the life of me, but this was either $80 or $90. I think it was $80, but it may have been $90. I honestly can't remember. And for that price, it kind of feels bananas to me, honestly. Like, $90 is a lot for this. And it's not like they're paying a licensing fee. They own both of these properties, so there's no reason this needs to be inflated for no reason. Now, I will say Megatron is large. I will give him that. He is definitely larger than a current leader class figure. I don't think he's quite as tall as a commander class. He's probably somewhere in between. So if you think about the fact that a commander class is usually like $80 or $90, but then this comes with a G.I. Joe that they probably would retail on its own for like 15 to 20, and you kind of take that off the top, so now you're in the like 60 to 70 range, and he is kind of halfway in between a leader class and a commander class. So, like, I guess it makes sense if you think about it like that, if you really kind of find a rationale for it. And if he wasn't so hollow, I don't think I would mind the price point, because like I said, he is big, and it's a really solid looking HISS tank when you're done. If he just wasn't so hollow and maybe had a few more paint applications, he does have a decent amount of paint applications, but a few more would have been nice. Just maybe a little bit more in the chest area. I feel like that's kind of bland, but then again, they may have done that intentionally because it's just on the back of a HISS tank and they wanted it to kind of blend in a little bit more in the vehicle mode, so maybe that was intentional. I don't know. I feel like I'm making excuses for this thing because I want to love it, and it's just not perfect, but it's also not terrible. I don't hate it by any means. Like, there is enjoyment to be had here, and I want to also give them the benefit of the doubt that this was their first entry into this line, and so I'm hoping that it'll just get better and better as time goes on, and I'm hoping that they will kind of really find their groove and really find the balance between focusing on both modes so that they're both good, instead of one being incredible and one being meh. Because that's kind of where I'm at with this guy. But the more I spend with it, the more time I spend with it, the robot mode is growing on me. But it really does just feel like somebody threw a bunch of HISS tank pieces on top of Megatron. Which I guess maybe that's what they're going for. I don't know. I'm like convincing myself to like this the more that I talk. I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you like this thing? Am I making excuses? Should I be harder on it? I honestly can't decide. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching.